You know, sometimes folks, I get into arguments. Or sometimes I need to correct somebody. But instead of just blabbing out nonsense, I like to use, that's right, logic, the supporting reasoning that backs up the argument that you're trying to make. But for some reason, and mainly on the internet, a lot of people don't like to use the word logic. Why? Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of reasons why people probably don't like to use logic. And one of those reasons I blame is nostalgia. Ah, yes, that magical word that helps us reminisce on the good old days. It's nice to reminisce sometimes. The issue with nostalgia is sometimes it can turn into its own personal drug. When people start overdosing on nostalgia, they begin to act a bit delusional. They can't accept the fact that the things that they grew up with are not always better than the newer things. Which now brings us to the topic discussion of the video. Classic Lola versus Looney Tunes show Lola. And if you haven't seen an argument between which one is better, this is where not only logic goes out of the window, but common sense as well. Now, back when I made a Furry Girl profile on Lola, I pointed out that Lola was my very first furry crush even before I knew what the furry fandom was. So truth be told, I like Lola regardless of whatever incarnation she's currently in. And when we talk about the incarnations of Lola, or the personalities of Lola, there's not just two Lolas, but three Lolas. Spacejam Lola, Comic Lola, and Looney Tunes show Lola. The one in the middle is Comic Lola. She's actually the balance of the two. But what happens is, when arguments start, she is completely disregarded for the other two. But, Jawbreaker, old boy, I am quite confused. What exactly do you mean by balance? I said exactly what I meant. A balance. Comic Lola could take a beating, talk smack, act very unladylike, get revenge, and yet still be just as sassy and hot as her Spacejam counterpart. But, back to what I was saying about the other two Lolas. Despite my third-rate love affair with Lola, the difference between me and other people who can't take off their rose-colored glasses is that I have zero issue pointing out either of their flaws. Now listen to how this sounds. Hey man, what are you talking about? Looney Tunes show Lola is stupid. Spacejam Lola will always be the best. The best at what? Being a penis magnet? When people overly support Spacejam Lola, they seem to completely disregard what a Looney Tune typically acts like. The original Looney Tunes came from slapstick comedy. They fall off cliffs, they get blown up, anvils drop on her head, etc. And they did all that with one goal in mind, which was to make their audience laugh. The most she had was a few one-liners and her good looks. Now, mind you, it's not entirely her fault either. When you appear only approximately 30 minutes out of an entire movie, you don't really have much to go on anyway. Now then, please forgive me, Spacejam Lola. I'm so sorry I had to call you out on your shit. I still love you. Excuse me. Looney Tunes show Lola is way better. Not only is she funnier, but she's not just some eye candy like the old Lola. She never stopped being eye candy. And on occasions, she even emphasized her sex appeal just like her other two counterparts. You think I'm fibbing? Go look at the Looney Tunes show episode Double Date and see how she tries to work her magic on Daffy. In this particular show, she's still very pretty in her own right. The only difference is she doesn't have the supermodel shape that Spacejam Lola has. As for that funny side of her, yeah, she's very hilarious. Unfortunately, it took her becoming a stereotypical dumb blonde and a stalker to get to that point, which is not exactly original or good itself. Now, the reality of the situation is, regardless of the flaws in their personalities, both Lolas actually fit perfectly into the role they were given. But if these two ended up with each other's roles, that's when it'll truly start becoming a disaster. Some people like to think otherwise, but I say that's complete nonsense. Let's analyze Spacejam first. So the plot basically was, Looney Tunes Land faced invasion from these little aliens that came from Moron Mountain. They were sent by their boss to enslave the Looney Tunes and bring them back so they can be the live entertainment for their planet. But because these aliens were so very short and not very bright, the Looney Tunes made a deal with them. They challenged them to a basketball game, assuming it was going to be an easy victory, and agreeing to be their slaves if they lose. However, the little guys proved to be a lot more crafty than they were given credit for. They began sneaking into basketball games and stealing the talent away from the best NBA players at that time period. And when they fed on that talent, they transformed into these huge, bulky monsters nicknamed the Monstars. Now, not only are they very talented, but they can easily overpower the Looney Tunes with ease. This is where the Looney Tunes hit the panic button and decided that they needed help. Because if they didn't, they were going back to Moron Mountain, and it was not going to be a pleasant experience. So after they recruited former top NBA player turned horrible baseball player Michael Jordan, we soon meet Lola Bunny for the first time, and she quickly establishes herself after she embarrasses Bugs on the court after he puts his rabbit foot in his mouth. Now, let me go ahead and say this. As much as a guilty pleasure Space Jam was to us, the movie was indeed overall bad. Not only was it one big Nike promo, but Michael Jordan at times seemed like he was lost, and the jokes were just utterly corny. So we can assume Lola's character came with the territory. She wasn't brought in to so much be funny like the other Looney Tunes. She was brought in to target the female audience. Now mind you, storyline wise, I'm pretty sure the other Looney Tunes were not too concerned about what comedy degree she had. They were just trying to avoid slavery by any means necessary. And because Lola was so very talented at basketball, she fit the bill perfectly. Now here's why I think Looney Tunes show Lola would not have worked for Space Jam. Though she does have a loony personality to her, if she was introduced into Space Jam, her role probably wouldn't be as memorable as the Space Jam Lola we know today, because she probably would have blended in with the other numbskull male Looney Tunes a bit too much, and wouldn't have been able to separate herself character-wise. Besides, no diss to Looney Tunes show Lola, but the personality of a strong independent woman character probably works more towards Space Jam's theme than Goofy Airhead. But probably the number one thing that distinguishes the two is their sports skills. Space Jam Lola had a love for basketball, and she was actually really good at it. Looney Tunes show Lola, on the other hand, had a love for tennis, and she couldn't play to save her life. And I feel I must remind you again that during the team practice session scene, before Lola came in, Michael Jordan was actually the only real good player on the team. And the Toon Squad desperately needed warriors who could play basketball. So for this Lola to come in and try out, she would have just been more pretty faced than she would have been useful. Now for the Looney Tunes show argument. But before that, I must point this out because oddly enough, some people do not understand the difference. The Looney Tunes show is completely separate from Space Jam. Space Jam and the Looney Tunes show never happened. Michael Jordan never came to Looney Tunes Land, and Looney Tunes show Lola is a completely different take on the character away from Space Jam's Lola. And no, a tennis ball to the head did not change her personality. Anywho, the Looney Tunes show was the Looney Tunes that dared to be different by taking the Looney Tunes away from its classic slapstick routine and taking it more into sitcom. This, a vast majority of the time, took them out of their usual wacky routines and tried to fit them into modern, civilized society. Because of this, some of the usual classic personalities have been completely changed. For example, Taz is playing the role of Bugs Bunny's dog. Gossamer, the big furry red one in the back, is a big kid in the monster's body. And Witch Hazel, she's black. Now, for those of us who actually know him, we all know Bugs' character personality is usually witty, sarcastic, he's a bit of a prankster. He's still pretty much the same, only he's slightly less wackier than classic Bugs. This Bugs is stuck more with the sophisticated role and being the voice of reason. I would describe him as a borderline Gary Stu, and Gary Stu is the male version of a Mary Sue. And for those who don't know what I mean, a Gary Stu and a Mary Sue are characters who basically are perfect and have no flaws. He does have his flaws. Now, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking because of this laid back and voice of reason type personality, the creators wanted to actually pair him up with his complete opposites. So they placed him with, in my opinion, the only two characters who managed to separate themselves and make the show work, his greedy, pathological lying, greedy ass roommate, Daffy Duck, and his eventual girlfriend, you already guessed it, Lola Bunny. Now, old school fans like to give this Lola a hard way to go simply because she didn't come first, and because she became a stereotypical dumb blonde. But that's just it. That stereotype is what made her work for this particular show. A goofy, over-talkative character with no space between her thoughts besides Bugs. She was so overly obsessed with him that she was literally driving Bugs nuts in the beginning. And it's not just limited to Bugs either. She did it to Daffy for a brief period too. And it was funny seeing the stalking antics she would pull just because of her crush on them. That's what I believed worked for her. That's what I believe separated her from everybody else in this TV show. And I think the whole ironic part about this thing is that made it work even more is Spacejam Lola. Because it was completely mind-blowing to see the 360 in her personality compared to where she came from. Now, I still in a way miss the old Lola. But I get so sick of seeing arguments about the Looney Tunes show is shit and that they hate the new Lola Bunny compared to the old one. Look, you wanted the old Lola Bunny and Looney Tunes show so bad? Okay. There's already a good number of characters in this show with a similar personality. Take your pick. They're not very loony, and a good number of the times their jokes were a hit and miss. So why would you put the old Lola in a show like this? She wouldn't have worked nearly as well, and if anything, it was the right thing to do to make Lola the way she is in this show. But that's just my opinion. You can take it or leave it however you want. Anyway, video's over. Thanks for watching, everybody. I do hope you enjoyed this slight rant and comparison. Hopefully, it will help some of you to stop spouting nonsense!